Good morning, evening, or night, wherever you are. Welcome to WHAM today. Take a deep breath, clear your mind, and let's drift through the whispers of today's world, one quiet thought at a time. As we wrap up Sunday, 20th July 2025, let's see what stories are unfolding around us. China's economic sentiment is showing signs of recovery as investors anticipate government interventions to tackle issues like price wars and overcapacity. The People's Bank of China is holding steady on its benchmark lending rates, with the one-year loan prime rate at 3% and the 5-year LPR at 3.5%. A rush is on in China's hard tech sector, with Unitree Robotics filing pre-IPO documents with CITIC Securities, highlighting a move towards commercializing robotics. Chinese open-source AI models like Kimika 2 and Qwen 3 are now outperforming those from Google and Meta. Quantum computing could reach a threshold of usefulness in 3-5 years, according to Spink, a Chinese startup producing both small-scale NMR quantum computers and industrial-grade superconducting quantum computers. However, AF brands Neta and Zeekr have been inflating car sales figures, with Neta inflating sales for over 60,000 cars to reach ambitious targets. Adding to concerns, a Wells Fargo executive and a U.S. government employee faced an exit ban in China, creating unease for foreign businesses despite Beijing's efforts to attract overseas investment. The Wells Fargo banker was reportedly involved in a criminal case. Despite these challenges, China's exports of rare earth magnets to the United States jumped by 660% in June compared to May, following successful trade discussion. Huawei is also emerging as a strong competitor in the AI sector. Piani, the Trump administration has reduced its aggressive stance against China. The Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer met with Chinese officials in Geneva. China has strongly criticized the EU's sanctions on 2 Chinese banks for aiding Russia, vowing to protect Chinese companies' interests. China confirmed a meeting between Xi Jinping and EU's Ursula von der Leyen and Antonio Costa. Domestically, Beijing plans to publish a list of innovative drugs eligible for commercial health insurance coverage. China is also moving forward with the construction of the world's largest hydropower dam. The Shangri-La Group has introduced its super luxury hotel brand, Shangri-La Signatures, in mainland China. Turning to Hong Kong, stocks are on the rise, with the Hang Seng Index increasing by 0.7% to 24,994.14, a level not seen since November 2021. United States trade policy is in focus as the nation considers tariffs as an alternative to sanctions to address economic imbalances, though concerns about inflation and retaliation loom. President Trump's proposal for a 100% tariff on Russian goods could significantly increase the cost of urea, impacting U.S. farmers importing about $1.30 billion of fertilizer from Russia annually. The U.S.-China Business Council, representing over 270 American companies, underscores the enduring significance of trade relations between the U.S. and China. Meanwhile, the EU is also preparing contingency plans for a potential no-deal scenario with the U.S. and turning to Russia, the Kremlin insists on achieving its objectives in Ukraine, despite ultimatums, but has stated it favors a new round of peace talks with Ukraine, highlighting the differences between the two countries' positions. A Russia-linked refinery in India is seeking early payment after facing curbs. The nation is experiencing heightened drone attacks, leading to the shutdown of Moscow airports. Russia claims to have downed 142 Ukrainian drones, including 27 over the Moscow region. Trade cooperation between Russia and North Korea is expanding, evidenced by Russian stores now selling apples from North Korea. The EU has imposed new sanctions targeting Russia's energy revenue, shadow fleet, and a Russian-owned oil refinery in India, eliciting a defiant response from Moscow. An Iranian oil tycoon has also been sanctioned by the EU for involvement in Russian trade. Germany's chancellor has declared that Russian assets will remain frozen until Moscow pays reparations to Ukraine. In Ukraine, Russia continues its strikes on Kyiv and has targeted a kindergarten school. Ukraine launched a major drone attack, causing chaos at major airports in Moscow. Russia claims to have downed 142 Ukrainian drones, including 27 over the Moscow region. Russia insists on achieving its goals in Ukraine, despite ultimatums, but has stated it favors a new round of peace talks with Ukraine, highlighting the differences between the two countries' positions. The European Union is proactively preparing a plan for a no-deal scenario with the US. The EU is also preparing new sanctions on Russian diesel, set to take effect in January, and has sanctioned an Iranian oil tycoon for involvement in Russian trade. New EU sanctions also target Russia's energy revenue, shadow fleet, and a Russian-owned oil refinery in India, following the war in Ukraine. Germany's chancellor stated that Russian assets will remain frozen until Moscow pays reparations. Looking at China, Sean Stein, president of the U.S.-China Business Council, emphasizes the importance of trade between the U.S. and China, representing over 270 American companies. A report by an Australian think tank suggests China's influence in Southeast Asia is growing due to its infrastructure financing, while the U.S. and EU are reducing foreign aid budgets. Shifting to Hong Kong, the Hong Kong Science and Technology Parks Corp., HKSTP, has appointed Terry Wong Ping Sao as CEO, effective August 1st, succeeding Albert Wong Hak Kung after 9 years. Wong brings 30 years of global executive leadership experience. In India, a Russia-linked refinery is seeking early payment after facing curbs, reflecting the impact of international sanctions. The EU has imposed new sanctions targeting a Russian-owned oil refinery in India. Turning to North Korea, trade cooperation with Russia is expanding, with Russian stores now selling apples from North Korea. Finally, in energy markets, oil prices slightly decreased as traders focused on US trade talks and the EU's initiatives to limit Russian energy exports. India's stock markets closed on a high note, with the Nifty 50 exceeding 25,000, propelled by strong banking sector performance, particularly HDFC Bank and ICICI Bank. The Sensex climbed 443 points, 0.54%, to close at 82,200.34, while the Nifty 50 increased 122 points, 0.49%, to 25,090.7. The BSE Mid-Cap Index also saw gains, although the BSE Small-Cap Index remained unchanged, and a decline in Reliance shares tempered overall gain. Nuvama Institutional Equities reports that India's equity market remains among the most expensive globally. Vinay Rajani of HDFC Securities maintains a bullish outlook, especially for the metal and FMCG sectors, despite uncertainties in trade negotiation. Krishnan Farara of Marcellus points to tariffs as a significant risk for India, while noting that domestic mutual funds and retail investors have provided stability, offsetting reduced foreign investment. Angel One's 60% profit slump in Koenue raises concerns about the broking industry's health. The line between legitimate arbitrage and illegal market manipulation is receiving increased focus in India. India's CB has allowed Jane Street to resume trading after depositing yet 4,844 crore in escrow. Equity analysts in India are outperforming global peers in long-short modeling. India's record renewables rollout progresses toward its 2030 goal. Bonfiglio's India unit is reportedly considering a $250 IPO. Heltech's software division is partnering with a Swiss network in India. Apple's iPhone production has soared in India as the country gains prominence amid slowing U.S. demand. India's Russian oil imports saw a slight increase in January-June. Indian retail investor losses on derivative trades widened in 2024-25, according to the regulator. Indian furniture brand Wooden Street aims to quadruple revenue in 3 years and is considering an IPO, according to its CEO. Millions of job seekers in India are facing a skills shortage. Meanwhile, most Gulf stocks experienced a downturn because of concerns about potential U.S. tariffs, even as Egypt's stock market soared to a record high. United Kingdom businesses are weighing relocation strategies in response to potential EU tariffs that could reshape the economic landscape. Despite a broader downturn in London's housing market, Wimbledon stands out with strong performance in the prime southwest London property sector. The government is actively promoting investment in UK shares, while a proposed UK wealth tax is meeting resistance from tech CEOs and venture capitalists. Storage property REIT has reported robust occupancy rates and successful acquisitions within the UK commercial real estate market. Amidst ongoing conflict, both Ukraine and Russia have voiced a willingness to re-engage in peace negotiations, although substantial disagreements persist regarding their respective aims. Russia is steadfast in its commitment to achieve its objectives in Ukraine, even when faced with ultimatums. Military actions continue unabated, with Russia launching strikes on Kyiv that reportedly targeted a Kindergarten. Meanwhile, Ukraine asserts it has struck a Russian air base. Ukraine has also executed drone attacks, including a significant one that disrupted operations at Moscow airport. Russia claims to have intercepted 142 Ukrainian drones, with 27 of those downed over the Moscow region. The European Union has implemented a fresh round of extensive sanctions against Russia, notably including restrictions on a Russian-owned oil refinery in India, which Macron has termed unprecedented. Azerbaijan is calling on Russia to acknowledge responsibility for the downing of a passenger jet by Russian air defense systems, but Moscow has so far resisted the investigation. Europe's stock markets are showing a mixed performance as investors weigh tariff uncertainties and analyze varied earnings reports. Some traders foresee potential gains in European small-cap stocks. BlackRock's Jewel points out that current European earnings reflect tariff risks. Profit warnings are rising, contributing to the FTSE 100's decline. Ryanair has reported a substantial 128% profit increase. Competition in the share trading sector is intensifying, with SIX and Acquis aiming to secure 20% of the European market. The EU is formulating contingency plans to address a potential no-deal scenario with the US. The European Union has introduced extensive new sanctions against Russia, targeting energy revenue and its shadow fleet. These measures include restrictions on a Russian-owned oil refinery in India, all in response to the ongoing war in Ukraine. These sanctions are now in effect, despite Moscow's strong opposition. Additionally, the EU has sanctioned an Iranian oil tycoon for his involvement in Russian trade and 2 Chinese banks for their support of Russia. China has strongly criticized the EU's actions against the Chinese banks, labeling it a wrong practice and pledging to protect the interests of Chinese companies. A key summit between leaders from China and the EU is expected, with China confirming a meeting between Xi Jinping and EU's Ursula von der Leyen and Antonio Costa. Japan's ruling coalition, under Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba, has lost its majority in the upper house of parliament. This political shift has already stirred market reactions and fueled concerns about the nation's stability. Despite this electoral setback, Prime Minister Ishiba has affirmed his commitment to remain in office. The Japanese yen has gained strength in the wake of the election results, with analysts predicting increased fluctuations in both the currency and Japanese stocks. Investors are paying close attention as Japan's bond market hints at potential anxieties. This election outcome carries implications for global investors, particularly due to the resulting political uncertainty and the expected volatility of the yen. A recent Reuters survey reveals that a majority of Japanese companies are seeking an additional budget in response to looming tariffs imposed by the United States. Ishiba's electoral defeat now casts doubt on the future of US-Japan trade negotiation. In other news, Japan has slightly increased its imports of Russian oil during the first half of the year, from January to June. Saudi Arabia is undergoing significant economic diversification, with a focus on renewable energy and financial innovation. The kingdom is currently reviewing its megaprojects, including the ambitious $500 billion The Line project. Aqua Power has signed agreements with European companies to export renewable energy, and the country is investing $8 billion to further enhance its renewable energy sector, focusing particularly on green hydrogen as a future energy source. In finance, Saudi Arabia is becoming a fintech hub, scheduled to host the Fintech Revolution Summit in 2025. The banking sector is showing resilience and profit growth, creating strategic opportunities in the diversifying economy. The kingdom has issued $16 in new sukuk and will permit sports clubs to trade on the Saudi Stock Exchange starting July 22. Saudi Arabia's aviation sector is also expanding, with the approval of a new Dammam-based budget airline backed by Air Arabia, and the announcement of a new low-cost airline with a fleet of 45 planes. Foreign investment is on the rise, highlighted by Al Futtaim's acquisition of a 49.95% stake in Senami Retail, strengthening the retail sector, and Bosnia and Saudi Arabia are set to revive an investment protection agreement. BlackRock is also increasing its engagement within Saudi Arabia. At the G20 summit, the Saudi finance minister has advocated for urgent reform of the global trade system. Despite these positive developments, the Tadawul All-Share Index closed lower by 0.38%. Australia's financial markets witnessed a downturn as shares retreated from record highs, particularly affecting bank stocks. South32 provided a notable exception to this trend, showing positive results. Regulators in Australia have revoked the credit licenses of 7 financial entities. The Australian Securities and Investments Commission will implement new rules for derivative transaction reports in 2025, impacting forex tax procedures. Economists in Australia are awaiting the release of the comprehensive monthly inflation report for November. The southern regions of Australia are grappling with an intensifying algal bloom crisis, which is causing significant damage to marine ecosystems. Following Prime Minister Anthony Albanese's recent visit to China, Chinese media highlighted the positive outcomes, while Australian outlets focused on worries about China potentially trying to undermine the Australia-United States alliance. Turning to Ukraine, the nation received military assistance from Australia, including the delivery of tanks to support its defense efforts. In Odessa, a drone strike caused 1 death. Asian stock markets presented a mixed picture, mirroring Wall Street's recent rally and the U.S. market's third straight week of gains, though U.S. futures hinted at modest growth. The Hang Seng Index, HSI, increased by 0.6%, while the Nikkei saw a minor drop of 80 points. Trading activity in Asian stocks slowed as the yen strengthened after elections in Japan. Several growing Asian companies show significant insider ownership, sometimes up to 32%. The Trump administration is increasingly focused on Asian economies due to their growing trade surplus since the 2018-19 U.S.-China trade war. The surplus with the U.S., excluding China, doubled to $400 billion by the end of the previous year. South Africa recently wrapped up its G20 finance meeting, issuing a communique that spurred gains in South African assets. Despite this, the South African rand showed little movement, with inflation figures taking center stage for the week. In other news, a former CEO from the South African banking sector has successfully established 2 tech companies, each valued at R1 billion. Expanding its reach, Honor is preparing to introduce its Magic V5 smartphone to the South African market, with aspirations of transforming the local smartphone landscape. Shifting focus to the G20, the United States has announced its intention to steer the group back towards its original financial focus when it assumes the presidency from South Africa in the coming year. Canada is currently hosting a meeting of provincial premiers in Ontario, where they will engage in discussions centered on interprovincial and international trade. Meanwhile, in Canadian financial news, experts are providing insights into accelerated retirement planning, particularly for individuals aiming to retire within a decade without existing savings. Investment recommendations included a focus on MDA stock alongside high-yield dividend stocks listed on the TAX, and a monthly dividend stock with a 4.2% yield, which is being promoted to income-focused investors. Indonesia was recently the site of a tragic ferry fire near Sulawesi Island, claiming at least 5 lives. Indonesian investors are currently weighing the complexities of a potential sale of the nation's kangaroo bonds. Meanwhile, Indonesian media outlets have voiced criticism of Kluivert, focusing on the national team's disappointing performance during a World Cup playoff match against Saudi Arabia, adding pressure on the team's management. Taiwan is set to engage in further trade talks with the United States this week, aiming to deepen economic ties. Adding to the island's strategic considerations, Taiwanese tech firms are reportedly scaling back their operations in mainland China. This decision is driven by increasing cybersecurity threats and broader security anxieties. Military tensions remain a concern, as recent Chinese incursions have been detected in areas surrounding Taiwan. In economic news, Taiwanese shares closed in negative territory, with TSMC, Taiwan's semiconductor manufacturing company, undergoing a period of consolidation. Singapore is positioning itself as a financial powerhouse, with analysts suggesting the Singapore dollar could emerge as a safe haven currency, potentially challenging the dominance of traditional options such as the Swiss franc, yen, and US dollar. The country is also earmarking $856 million for the initial phase of a strategic stock plan. Across the globe in the United States, President Trump is weighing a substantial 50% tariff on all goods imported from Brazil, a move that could significantly impact the U.S. coffee industry, given that Brazil accounts for roughly 30% of U.S. coffee import. Furthermore, broader U.S. tariff anxieties are contributing to a downturn in most Gulf stock markets. Turning to Germany, the CEOs of Siemens and Deutsche Bank are collaborating to promote Germany as a prime investment location. Siemens emphasizes Germany's rich industrial data resources, which could be highly valuable for advancing artificial intelligence. Leading German companies are initiating a major investment drive to stimulate economic growth. In South Korea, the South Korean won is nearing a concerning exchange rate of 1,400 against the dollar, as the nation braces for possible reciprocal tariffs imposed by the United States. Meanwhile, in North Korea, apples grown within the country are now being sold in Russia. Shifting focus to Azerbaijan, the nation is demanding that Russia take responsibility for the downing of a passenger jet by Russian air defense systems. Moscow is currently resisting the ongoing investigation. In France, an investigation into X, formerly Twitter, is underscoring the volatility within Europe's tech stock market, largely driven by regulatory pressures. Over in Spain, Huawei is actively defending its hardware, asserting that it poses no threat to Spain's wiretapping infrastructure. Poland is actively pursuing a stake in ISI, a specialized company focused on advanced surveillance satellite technology. Regarding the ongoing conflict, Israel is reportedly preparing to launch an assault on the last remaining town in Gaza. Lastly, in Egypt, the Egyptian stock market is currently experiencing a record high. And that's a wrap for today's news, because even headlines need a nap. Stay curious, stay kind, and let the noise fade as you find your quiet. Take care, stay awesome, and I'll see you next time on WHAM Today.